I will go ahead and get started. First of all, I want to let people know that we are recording the large group session of this, so just be aware it goes on our e-library later. Also, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Heather Whitson. For some of you, it's been a little while since I've seen you, but I co-lead the MCC Scholars Program along with Leah Hanson, who you can see on your screen.
Hello.
And I am a professor of medicine, a geriatrician, and an investigator at Duke University. And today I'm really excited to be introducing the first webinar of our 5th cycle of the Aging Initiative MCC Scholars Program. So we're really excited to be joined today by Elizabeth Stevens, who's going to be presenting her work on collaborative research networks. So Dr. Stevens is an assistant professor in the Department of Population Health at the NYU Grossman School of Medicine. She has a background in implementation science and decision science, and her work is focused on meta-research, or the study of research itself, with the goal of identifying approaches to encourage diversity and collaboration in the production of high-value health research. She was recently awarded an NIA-K01 award to study research collaboration networks among researchers focused on aging. So if only we knew such a network, right? As a bit of housekeeping, I just wanted to let you know that we'll be keeping attendees on mute during her presentation, and that's just to minimize audio feedback. But please feel free to participate via the chat. So we also will have allocated 10 minutes of open Q&A following the presentation, and we'll welcome you to come off mute and pose your questions or make additional comments during that time. And then following that Q&A session, you'll be getting split into 2 different breakout groups, and one of you will be for the cohort 5, newest group of scholars, and one for alumni scholars. So we'll ask you during that time, and we'll remind you of these instructions, but we will ask you to pick one of the following prompts that will send you into your group, and then when you get into your group, you'll have a couple of questions to sort of prompt discussion within the group, but we'll give you those instructions afterwards. If you have any technical issues while you're on the call, please direct those to Ollie DeRochers, who's monitoring the chat, and she is our research coordinator within the Aging Initiative and does everything to make this successful behind the scenes. So big thank you to Ollie, as always. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Stevens. So Dr. Stevens, take it away.
Great, thank you, and thank you for having me. I am excited to share some of the work I've been doing. As you mentioned, I just received a K01 award to look at the aging research networks and collaboration within them. And that's the work I'm going to share with you today. I hope you find it interesting and relevant to the work that you're doing. Let me share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can see my regular screen there. So this work is looking at how we develop research collaborative research networks. Specifically, my research is focusing on networks among aging researchers. However, really they're applicable to all types of research. So in general, my outline is I'm going to discuss a little bit about collaborative research and why it's important and some of the barriers to doing it. To introduce meta-research, which is the research on research aspect, and talk a bit about my current projects as well as some of the future work that I'm hoping to do. So collaborative research, we all know that it's important and that together we can do more than as individuals. And as you know as well, care for older adults in general is very complex. It demands a lot of knowledge and skills and expertise that no one person can provide. And with research as well, that applies in that you can't have any one certain type of researcher be able to investigate everything that's needed for care of older adults. There's also a rapidly diversifying patient population in this group, and the research we do can be more impactful when performed collaboratively and also with increased diversity. So collaboration can optimize the research value. However, researchers often remain siloed in their work and don't create very diverse networks. So breaking down those silos is important because it creates a faster pace of research, increases the quality and impact of that research, as well as creates more inclusive and diverse research, and in the end can be a more efficient use of resources. However, there are numerous barriers to collaboration, many of which I'm sure you yourselves have experienced. There are some issues like organizational culture, competition for funding and recognition when it comes to authorships, papers, PIs, that sort of thing, as well as limited incentives or recognition for participating in collaborative research, as well as some legal and ethical issues regarding data sharing and intellectual property. But there are also interpersonal issues that lead to barriers to collaboration, such as a lack of trust and communication, limited collaboration skills, geographical distance, difficulty establishing those research networks, as well as some in-group favoritism where you're more likely to work with those you know or those you know instead of with newer people. And so the goal is to promote diversity and collaboration and at the moment we put a lot of investment into establish and maintain mentorship programs, training programs, as well as the development of research consortia that are intended to help bring researchers together. However, in spite of all of these intensive resources being put in here, generally, we've failed to substantially increase diversity among researchers studying aging, particularly in leadership roles where less than 25% of PIs are non-white. This is with the NIH funding. And there really is no guidance or best practices for creating research consortia, nor no data on how to improve these programs. And in general, there's very little critical analysis or innovation around how we seek to promote our collaborations. So in comes meta-research, which is research on research. So it is the discipline to study research itself and its practices. It examines research practices with the same scientific rigor given to other areas of scientific inquiry and uses many of the same type of methods, whether it be trials or literature reviews, observational studies, etc. And the topics explored in meta-research are very broad, but can be broken down into a few specific categories, such as methods, which is how research itself is performed, reporting, how research is communicated, so the publication process, looking at replicability and reproducibility, so how we verify and replicate our research, evaluation, so how we are evaluating the value and impact of research, as well as incentives, so how research is rewarded or supported, which is the primary area of my research focus. And why is this important? So, as I said, there's significant uncertainty in current and best practices, and doing this research will lend academic rigor to improve collaboration and diversity efforts, as well as help identify some systemic issues and contributing factors that hinder the participation and collaboration, as well as provide evidence needed to effectively innovate those new strategies that are needed. My research goals overall are to create a foundation to understand and address the barriers to collaborative research, as well as provide evidence to support the value of research collaboration. I want to examine the systemic, environmental, and individual factors that contribute to collaboration behaviors, as well as help develop policies and best practices to enhance the connection of diverse researchers. So leading into some of the current work that I'm doing, which primarily focuses around social network analyses. So my K award, the primary goal is to determine factors contributing to the development of successful research collaboration networks, and how to support increased interdisciplinary collaboration and diversity within aging research. This is a longitudinal survey of researchers within 4 research consortia. They are a full network analysis, which means that I'm hoping to look at all of the researchers within a research consortia and see who they're all connected to. And so this will map the collaborative relationships over time, as well as the strength of those relationships, by asking like the type of collaborative work that people are doing with each other, as well as measure productivity in the form of papers published, grants received, et cetera, to see whether there are any certain types of collaborations that are more productive than others. And this will also allow me to assess the more individual as well as environmental institutional factors that contribute to the development of those. And so as of now, I'm currently in the process of distributing baseline surveys to 3 of the sites, while baseline data has been collected for 1 of the sites as it is. And some of the preliminary baseline social network analysis results that I have found, this is looking specifically at a national telemedicine research consortium that is based out of the Veterans Administration. So it has a total of 149 members who responded with, and 100 of those had response demographics specifically. And the connection range showed a great disparity in there are some people who are linked to no one and some people who are linked to almost every single member within the network. However, the majority of those people are, more within the 0 to 20 tie range instead. And that of all of the possible connections made within the network, only 10% of all the possible connections have been created. One interesting result that we've found is that the network characteristics do vary by gender, where a lot of the female-only network groups have a greater diversity versus male-only. The male-only networks are structured with clusters of collaborators, whereas the female collaborators tend to have a more dispersed network that's more intertwined rather than clustered. And interestingly, the females in general had a higher average feeling of engagement within the virtual care community, with an engagement score of 1 to 5 of I feel engaged with the VA virtual care community. And also due to the lack of a clustered kind of network, females also had fewer degrees of separation, which is the social network analysis is betweenness. And that just means that for one female researcher to connect with another, they have fewer people they have to go through in order to find that person. Also, we found that there's a greater number of collaborations between those of different ages, where your odds of collaboration are more than almost 3 times greater for each 10-year age difference between the researchers. The current working hypothesis about this is that it's because of the potential association due to mentorship structures, where younger researchers are more likely to be working with older ones just due to connections with mentorship, whereas peers in the same age group / same career position may not be collaborating as much. And however, in our modeling, the majority of the ties, though, were not explained by age alone. So there are other factors contributing to why people are doing the collaborations they are. For the next steps for this social network analysis, it's to collect that baseline data from the other research consortia, do a deeper dive into the member characteristics and tie formation, as well as measure collaboration productivity, as I mentioned, publications and grants. And what I'm doing is connecting individuals' CVs to each network member so that I can see how many papers are being published, et cetera, between individuals. And then each year, I'm going to perform an annual follow-up of 4 different waves in order to examine how those ties are changing over time and whether people are developing more ties as they've been involved in the research consortium more. In addition to the social network analysis research, I'm also doing some research looking at literature reviews to assess the state of the field. Also, interestingly enough, learning how difficult it is to search for a topic where researchers are the topic. Every single paper mentions researchers, which is an interesting finding in itself. Also trying to look at more big data analytics, so looking at publication databases to determine the impact of interdisciplinary collaboration on funding success, as well as this is coming from, we're going to be doing work with the NYU grants office so that we can see whether people who collaborate between departments are more likely to have funding success upon application, as well as looking at co-author characteristics on publication quality, quality being used in a loose term as far as like this tier of journal that people are being published in. And then also I've developed a relationship with our librarians who often are helping us researchers with all of our literature review needs and examining the process of how researchers and librarians collaborate together in order to increase the success of the literature reviews we're doing, increase their impact, as well as reduce some of the working burden that is on librarians. I wanted to thank Sam Adhikari, Antonio D'Alessandro, and Dr. Senga and as well as the Virtual Care Corps for helping me with some of these analyses. That is the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Stevens, for your excellent presentation. If you would like to enter your question into the chat, or you can raise your hand and come off mute, we'd be happy to take questions that way. It looks like, Julia, you have a question. Did you want to ask that, or?
Yeah, sure. I was just curious, you were saying that you're studying 4 different research consortia, and what's the definition for a consortium?
Right. So I don't have that. A research consortia is a fairly general term, but it's essentially looking at an organized network that brings researchers together. For example, the Virtual Care Corps, which is the one out of the VA, that is they distribute newsletters and funding announcements and help share work amongst them. However, there are other types of research consortia with like the Impact Collaboratory, which focuses on dementia research, that they're much more centralized, and what they do is that they're there to distribute the like funding announcements and connect people together in a centralized nature, but it's not like every researcher who's part of that network. And so I'm keeping it broad, and each of the 4 consortia really are quite different, which hopefully will help provide a little bit more generalizability of the results as well.
And then I was curious what, because you were describing a number of very, interesting and important outcomes that you could use. I was curious what you used as your primary outcome for your network analysis.
Right. So the primary, I'm the network analysis, the primary measure was the just establishment of like a collaborative connection. So in the survey, it asks like, do you know this person? Have you worked with them? Have you published grants? Have you published papers? Have you had a mentorship relationship? And so each of those is broken down. But overall, I'm looking at just connection more broadly. However, hoping to also look at those different levels of collaboration as well in the analysis.
And Caitlin, you have your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so that was really awesome. I think this type of research is so needed, but I feel like in my experience, sometimes it's really hard to like find national funders to be like receptive, I think, to this type of stuff for awards that aren't like P awards or like kind of program awards. So I'm wondering if you could just speak in general to your experience working, kind of putting in a K award that was in this type of kind of area of aging research.
Yeah, no, it's entertaining that you decide to bring that up because it is definitely an issue. That there are some countries like the Netherlands and the UK that really emphasize meta research and have funding specifically designated for it. However, the majority of researchers I know based in the US, their funding primarily comes from other types of research, and meta research is more what they do on the side. As far as getting my K award, I feel profoundly lucky that I was able to do so. I think that it's with the NIA, they do have specific goals that they have posted, which include like developing the research community, their capacity, that sort of thing. And so when I developed my K, it was focusing in on those goals and trying to pitch it to NIA in that way. To be honest, the first time I submitted it, I was summarily rejected and, not scored or anything like that. However, a second time around, I got very lucky. I think with my reviewers were different the second time. And so the first one, people didn't really understand what I was hoping to achieve with the research. But then the second time around, the reviewers were all very enthusiastic and, gave good scores and obviously led to me being funded. So I think it's a combination of, being like creative in how you're pitching it to people and also emphasizing like why this is important to different funding organizations that may be focused more on a single disease or something like that. And so that was really how I went about it. And I am hoping that through some of the library research that the National Library of Medicine will have more interest in this type of area. So that might be a source of funding, but to be very, frank, I don't anticipate meta research being the thing that funds me, going forward. I'll be continuing on with some of my other more health-focused research in addition, and then have this as my pet project.
Thanks so much.
Tara, you have your hand up and you have a comment.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should. I did both.
Perfect.
Great presentation. That's really interesting. But I was really curious when you're thinking about outcomes for people who are either more or less connected or more densely connected, like you were speaking about earlier. I wonder if you've seen or if you're looking at any outcomes related to like job satisfaction or happiness or how that would affect your level of engagement with your work.
Right. Yeah, and so that kind of leads into a plug that I have to make, which is that the survey that I'm distributing, it goes through a battery of different questions that look kind of at, personality things. So how individualistic versus group focused you are, looking at institutional like perceptions of how much your institution supports you, your perception of like work-life balance, that sort of thing. So I am, hoping to go into more of those details to see sort of, the connection both directions of whether people who feel they have more institutional support, collaborate more, or maybe like having more collaborations makes you feel more supported, like trying to figure out those kind of relationships. And the plug is that I am hoping to do this survey with all of the MCC scholars. And so in the next like couple of weeks, you'll probably receive an email from me with the survey. And so, I would appreciate your participation if you're able to do so. But that's my shameless plug.
Yeah.
I had a question. Hi, I'm Maddie Sterling from Cornell, a couple of blocks up the road. I was curious if you're looking at almost like as a, I don't want to say an independent predictor, but some sort of like covariate as to the topic that people are studying and also specialty, because I wonder like some topics may really promote collaboration if there's not like a, you really need to reach out. It's been my experience in home health, had to really reach across the aisle, across generations, and then also specialty, especially for aging, I imagine. Like I'm just looking at our group. I know a number of people bring a lot of different clinical perspectives that are really important, and also the PhD scientists. So I was curious how that could be folded in as well.
Right. Yeah. And I am hoping to look at some of that in these analyses. I'm collecting that information both on like methodological specialty as well as topical focus. And also like whether someone is a clinician, whether that be a doctor or a nurse, as well as more, PhD type of doctors as well. So that is an analysis that I'm hoping to do. But there's a lot of data to crunch at the moment. So. Okay, well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you all for participating. Oh, Heather, yeah.
I was going to ask one quick question. I'm sorry. I'm also interested if you know from the literature, or maybe this doesn't exist because maybe meta research hasn't been looking at this field long enough to know. But my question is kind of about generational effects. I think as an aging researcher, I'm always just very interested in generational effects, and especially when there's anything sort of social in the mix. It just feels like, the field is changing a lot in terms of demographic mix, but also just culture is changing in terms of approach to how whether it's through Zoom and use of things that in some ways allow us to collaborate in ways now that we couldn't have in the 90s, and societal forces that kind of affect this, but then also the field is changing in terms of its investment in team science. So I wonder if if there's any such work that has looked at this, people that were like us, but in the 90s.
Right. So there's very little research that's actually been done in like the health research world. Almost everything has been done in the management community. So a lot of business schools have been doing research sort of in that team science type of thing, as well as studies more about how technology influences collaboration, that sort of thing. And as far, there are definitely generational issues, or differences rather, between different age groups, where, and I think some of that is like cultural shifts within institutions that have promoted collaboration, sort of, as you said, that within the aging field, that team science and interprofessional collaboration is very important for aging care. And I think that is bleeding over into the research world as well. And so, but I think that, from personal experience as well, that it really varies, that there are still people who are, you know, of an older generation that are very pro collaboration and want to participate in that type of research, as well as some younger people who are not, and are more, you know, self-focused and want to keep the research to themselves. But I do think that with COVID and the rise of Zoom, it really has brought people together from more diverse, you know, geographical spaces that otherwise may not have been able to be in ready contact before. Great. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you having me here to hear more about my research, and I'll let you get on to your other activities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Thanks very much.
So Ollie, you have your hand raised.
No, she's clapping.